Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, brothers and sisters, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to this launch, this media launch of my new book, The An African Love Story of Arnold and Mignon. I have to say good afternoon, good morning, because I'm aware that we are live streaming this event and it is going out literally all around the world. Here in Barbados, right across the Caribbean, Ethiopia, United States of America, Canada, the UK, indeed all across the Pan African diaspora, they're here as live direct at this time. I would like to extend a very, very special welcome to a lady by the name of Miss Mignon Ford, who is no doubt tuned in to this live stream right now. Mignon is the granddaughter of Arnold and Mignon Ford, the daughter of Professor Abby Ford, who unfortunately passed in 2018. And indeed, it is to Professor Abby Ford that I dedicated this book. As I say in the dedication section, this book is dedicated to the memory of Professors Cecil Crawford and Abby Ford, both of whom committed themselves to honoring the legacies of Arnold Josiah Ford and Mignon Lorraine Lewis Ford, and to telling the story of their inspirational lives. Well, brothers and sisters, we have a packed and concise program for you, but before we go any further into the program, we want to present to you a musical composition of Rabbi Arnold Josiah Ford. It is easily his most famous composition. Some of us believe that it is perhaps the single most important song in the history of modern black music. It was the anthem of the Universal Negro Recruitment Association, and at a time when there were very few black independent countries, the UNIA declared that this song was the national anthem, the anthem of the entire black race. So this song became extremely important. It was sung all over the black world, wherever serious and committed black men and women came together to deal with the business of their people. Their meetings invariably began with a rendition of the Universal Ethiopian Anthem. And to perform the anthem for us here this evening, we have none other than Clement Comissiong on violin and Khalid Batson on guitar. Brothers and sisters, the Universal Ethiopian Anthem.
Good day, everyone. Please enjoy our rendition of the Universal Ethiopian Anthem.
money who he would tell you. Maybe it doesn't matter if you don't remind you before, go to the shop and give it. In other words, take like 3 seconds. You have like 3 seconds to adjust. You can get the sure you can switch. Because if you keep adjusting like that, you're on the shop. You got to adjust wrong. Right, only when you get the Italian behavior. Right. So by the time that, that when you every time you walk in the shop, give yourself like 3 seconds. But once you get on the shop, give yourself 3 seconds to adjust. You know, adjust the time. I would expect not to get closer. No, that's my understanding. So I'm making sure roads are not. Yes, it does. Great. Alright, don't worry.
Thank you. That was so beautiful and moving. Ethiopia, the land of our fathers, the land where the gods love to be. A storm cloud at night suddenly gathers our armies from Russia to thee. What powerful, powerful words. Brothers and sisters, I first learned about Arnold and Mignon way back in the early 80s. And from the time I heard about these life stories, they really struck a chord with me. I was so inspired by what I had heard. And I knew that someday I had to produce a book that would help to tell these stories, would help to bring these two heroes to the greater attention of our people. I have called the book the Pan-African Love Story of Arnold and Mignon. And it is really a Pan-African love story. On one level, it is the story of the love between this man, this Barbadian, Caribbean man, African man, and this Barbadian, Caribbean, African woman. But it is also a love story, a story of love of Africa, of the African people of Ethiopia. And I was very fortunate when I wrote this book that I was able to get the contribution of Queen Mother, Dr. Myrna Belgrave, to contribute the forward to this book. Because not only did Myrna know Professor Abifol extremely well, Minnie Abifol quite well, but she had visited Ethiopia. And there was no one better equipped to express the essence of that love that Arnold and Mignon had not only for each other, but for Africa, for Ethiopia, for the mystique and majesty of their people. And so I would now like to invite Queen Mother Dr. Myrna Belgrave. She is a veteran Pan-Africanist, a veteran educator, a veteran cultural administrator. She is a woman of many, many hats, dearly beloved here in Barbados, in the Pan-African community, but she has served not only in Barbados, but she has served our people right across the Caribbean, in North America, and on the continent itself. So it gives me great pleasure to invite Queen Mother Dr. Myrna Belgrave to address us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you, David, for that kind of introduction. Sometimes I feel that I wasn't here. Okay, it is my honor to do this critique, perhaps you would call it, but you can give it a name and I'm finished. It is the Pan-African love story. I love the cover. I love it so much. It is a narrative of love on many levels. It represents a love for ancestral history, a love for empowering religion, a love for music, culture, country, and contribution. And most of all, it is a narrative of love for the self. Of course, with the added benefits of love for partner and family. It is an account of our own Barbadian son and daughter, Arnold Josiah Ford and Mignon Lorraine Innes Ford. It is a focus particularly on the personal journey within the historic development of Arnold as an African in the diaspora, and that of his beloved Mignon, who was committed to similar ideals and who was as courageous, creative, and resilient as he was. I personally identify Arnold as a seeker of truth, and Mignon as a lover of secrets of truth. Truth seekers travel far and wide. They search everywhere. Arnold migrated to the United States and An acceptance and love for one's ancestral history is a powerful force that compels one to become a seeker of a truth that is dormant within the being. That type of search did that for Arnold Josiah. His family contained the notion that his family descended from an ancient, priestly Israeli clan. His migration to the United States widened his understanding of his historical roots, as well as his opportunities. And although he was baptized as a Methodist in Barbados, he encountered, identified with, and embraced the religious pathway called by many names, such as Ethiopian Hebrews, Black Jews, the Lost Tribe, the Beta Israel, and we know commonly it's called the Lashes. He began studying the Hebrew language and religion, and ultimately secured an ordination as a rabbi. He became known as Rabbi Arnold Ford. We are seeing in the book that a love for religious pathway that connects with history, that empowers one's identity. This connection, this religious pathway, can lead and compel one to reject all the labels, philosophies, dogmas, beliefs, doctrines, and the lifestyles that chain the mind and intellect, that keep the mind in victim consciousness, that suppress the deep truth within the soul, and fragment and weaken the spirit. Arnold found his own empowering religious pathway, the Hebrew religion, and he migrated again. This time to Ethiopia. Ethiopia, as we have heard, is a land that can easily capture one's love, can easily restore a dignity that has become trapped, almost lost in colonialism and enslavement. Ethiopia itself has never been captured, it has never been under foreign domination. I have spoken glowingly about my visit to the land and the forward of the book. And I can understand how it attracted and held the interest of both the rabbi and Mignon. I was myself enthralled by its quiet roots in antiquity and its historic sites and emblems. I still have Axum, one of the cities in Ethiopia, as one of my favorite meditation sites. Rabbi Ford penned the experience when he wrote, Ethiopia, thou land of our fathers, thou land where the gods love to be. That is Ethiopia, magical, spiritual, historical. He created the music in these lyrics, which is sang at most Pan-African gatherings. We call it the Pan-African National Anthem, and it was very inspiring. The Lord fell so deeply in love with the country of Ethiopia that when it was undergoing many hardships from the invading Italians, the rabbi on his deathbed gave his wife a promise not to leave the country after his death. Mignon, the one who also fell in love with the country, remained. And she started a school that made a significant contribution to the development of Ethiopian young girls. I had a wonderful opportunity to visit the school site and heard its history and its contribution during this year. my heart pumped with rage and pride. As an educator myself, I really sincerely salute her vision, her resilience, and her contribution. It takes a lot to do that. So we say in the book, I love self, love for religion, and a love for authentic connection to a God that has embraced the historical identity. You can see love for history, love for the rabbi's partner, love for Ethiopia, and love for contribution inspired this rabbi. And this combination of faith, this combination of love, and all of these levels, all aligned and created the opportunity for significant contribution to the Ethiopian community. And the solution for this as well. Such love produces a narrative that is fit for the book, even for sake or free, for inspiring, good connections to one's ancestral history and one's countrymen. The author, Ambassador David Comissiong, has woven these levels of love into this narrative of the Pan-African love story. It is detailed, rich, informative, engaging, filled with graphics, well researched, and the narrative invokes a lasting pride within the reader as we follow the journey of one Albanian son and daughter. Indeed, it is a love story for all ages, young and old, for all time, past, present, and future. It shares a special inspiration to the Africans in the diaspora, and we all are Africans by creation, whether we accept it or not. It is an inspiration that strengthens our love for ancestry, and we courageously continue to dive deeply into our past rich history as we continue to reconnect and embrace our own authentic resonance. Authentic resonance. And that's important. It must resonate inside of us. And they're waiting to be resonated. And it's from this resonance that we find fulfillment. Such dives build an awareness and power that make possible the creation of meaningful historic narratives as legacies of courage, tenacity, self-sovereignty, and contribution. Have before honored that possibility. David valued and recorded that possibility. And I consider it an honor to have been asked to bring forward to the book and to David's presentation. David, I congratulate you in seeing the value in sharing this episode, this slice of an African history. And I recommend the book highly and widely to everyone. And I hope our young children have a chance to dig into it and make their lives a unique narrative so that it can be recorded for all time. I thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sister. Our sister mentioned cover of the book. This beautiful cover was designed by the artists at a black printry in Barbados named Graphics. In fact, they printed the book. The cover, I gave them the concept what I wanted, but they produced the design, and it is really a very beautiful cover. It features 7 personalities on the cover. Empress Menen, Emperor Haile Selassie I, the Honorable Marcus Mosiah, Bishop Wentworth Matthew, one of the pioneers of the Black Jewish movement, Right Excellent Harold Walton Barrow, former Prime Minister of Barbados, National Hero of Barbados, and a young Arnold, a young Rabbi Arnold Ford, and a young Mignon Lorraine in his form. There's one historical personality who really should have been on the cover, and that is the African American musician James Reese Europe. The back cover tells you a little bit about what the book is all about. And I'll just read that quickly. This is what the back cover says. In this thrilling narrative, the reader is introduced to Arnold Josiah Ford, giant of Black music, legendary Black Jewish rabbi, stalwart of the Marcus Garvey movement, heroic back to Africa pioneer, and to Mignon Lorraine in his form, a courageous freedom fighter and a titan of educational reform and development in the African nation of Ethiopia. Experienced the love journey that took Arnold and Mignon from the Caribbean island of Barbados to the Black Mecca of 1920s Harlem in the United States, and then onward to the Empire of Ethiopia. Journey with them as Arnold collaborates with James Reese Europe to lay the foundation of Black classical music, with Marcus Garvey to develop the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and with Bishop Wentworth Matthew to spread the Black Jewish faith. Accompany them to the coronation of Emperor Haile Selassie I in Ethiopia, and witness how they both stand firm against the Italian invasion of Ethiopia, and how Mignon goes on to help rebuild Ethiopia with her phenomenal Princess Zenemi War School. The Pan-African love story of Arnold and Mignon Ford is chock-a-block with inspirational historical information that is critical to the fostering of progressive Black consciousness and to the development of a strong sense of Black or Pan-African identity. End of quote. And brothers and sisters, that really is what this book is all about. And that is what inspired the writing of this book. We have to give our people their history. Unfortunately, many of our people do not know who they really are, what their real capacities are, because they have a distorted view of their history. They have a distorted view of the journey and the achievements of their forefathers and foremothers. And those of us who know the true story, we have a duty to share that story. We are a remarkable people. We are a people who, we, Caribbean people, in Haiti, we, fresh out of enslavement, defeated the greatest armies of Europe, armies of France, Britain, and Spain. We built the citadel in Haiti, a wonder of early 19th century architecture and engineering, just out of slavery. We in Barbados planned the massive Boston slave rebellion. We in the mid-17th century. Although they called our people slaves, it was us, it was our ancestors who were running the first industrial enterprises of the European Industrial Revolution. The integrated sugar plantation with the windmill and the sugar factory. They said our people were slaves, but these enslaved Africans on that plantation were blacksmiths, carpenters, hoopers, boilers, carrying out the technical and industrial processes upon which the wealth and the power of modern European societies were built. Arnold Josiah Ford was born in 1877. 1877. A mere 39 years after the abolition of slavery in Barbados. Yet, Arnold Josiah Ford, in that racist colonial society, developed into a master musician, a master of the violin, the acoustic bass, and the harp. And at the age of 22, enlists in the British Royal Navy as a master musician. Tremendous natural ability and capacity. I will speak at greater length towards the end of our program, and I will share more information about the lives of Arnold and Mignon Ford. But suffice to say, these two Barbadians, this Caribbean man and Caribbean women, they were right there. They played critical roles in the development, in the Harlem Renaissance, the development of the music of Black America, jazz, spirituals, concert music of Black America. They played critical roles in the development of the Marcus Garvey movement, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, critical roles in the development of the Black Jewish faith, founding of the Commandment Keepers Temple in Harlem with Bishop Wentworth Matthews, going on to Ethiopia to the coronation of Emperor Haile Selassie I, contributing to the coronation, writing an anthem, composing an anthem in honor of Emperor Haile Selassie, standing firm when Mussolini invaded Ethiopia, and going on to play a role in the rebuilding of that African country. This is what this book is all about. It is 97 pages, a small volume, but it is chock-a-block with historical information and analysis. And the text is illustrated with some approximately 80 photographs. the book was consciously designed for a mass audience. This book is written for our people. This book is written for teenagers, for young adults, for mature people. It is written for the entire population. It is giving our people an extremely important component of their history. And I will have a little bit more to say later on, but at this point, I want to bring to you a Barbadian artist who, like me, was inspired by this story from when he first heard it. And he has gone on to produce several paintings depicting Rabbi Arnold Josiah Ford, the master musician. I speak of the artist known as, we all know as Guru. Person David McLean, one of our most outstanding Barbadian artists. He has a spirit style of painting, very highly trained. I know he went to Senegal, the biennial, art biennial in Senegal, and got great inspiration from that sojourn to the African continent. But this is a brother who does tremendous work in the field of art here in Barbados. And if you look behind me, you will see on display two of his paintings of Arnold Josiah Ford, master musician. Brothers and sisters, I give you David McLean, also known as Guru.
Good evening to my brothers and my sisters right here in Barbados and right across the world, right across our Pan-African world, right across our diaspora. I want to begin very simply with a smile. By thanking His Excellency David Comissiong, not only writing the book, but having courage to salvage such an important Pan-Africanist, probably more than we have the important Pan-Africanists in our modern Pan-Africanist. And I want to start with this slide because of Dr. Marion's daughter, what she spoke of, this great love story. So my smile comes like of our baby. I was first introduced to Ramsey Arnold in 1984 while doing some research for a project called Black Economic Figures. And I was, looking at the connections with Barbados and the way that support movements for the children. We looked at King Jaga's visit and his movement in Barbados. And he was also looking at Arnold, who is also a Barbadian, one of the first Masonic lodges on the planet. But when it came to Josiah Arnold Ford and his wife Mignon, born right here in Barbados, I definitely did not believe the story. So I want to begin very simply by saying that the Rastafarian community itself must be very grateful for Mignon and Arnold, because it was, we spoke of Africanism and Pan-Africanism, we spoke of Africa for Africans, but it was actually Rabbi Arnold Ford who was the first pioneers to Ethiopia, and that was in 1930. He wanted to reach for the event of the enthronement of His Imperial Majesty in his wife on the 2nd of November 1930. But he traveled on the ship probably in the late Dutch, and he arrived in Ethiopia in December. But he was not there to all the celebrations. But what really happened
is that when you mentioned about foreign unity and the greatness that we all show, is that when you speak of Darby, you have to speak on a parallel level as the Christian gentleman who actually wrote the charter for the United Negroes Improvement Association, Marcus Garvey. As Comissiong said before, he was also one of the man who started out with the first Jewish movement in the United States of America. But on that, it was his integrated and Pan-African base, because he actually made it for the tool with Marcus Garvey, and the great quote by Professor Tony Martin, when Garvey said that when he was afflicted and when he was being arrested for the nefarious charges that they brought against him, over the coordination of the UNIA, which had branches all over the world, including Barbados. It was Robbie J. Arnold who said, I've never been traded, I've never left him alone. It was Robbie J. Arnold that the United States government kept banging on his door for him to come to court to witness against Garvey. And he never, ever, ever budged. Actually, he wrote a song to enlighten us about the greatness of Marcus Garvey. I won't be introducing myself as a global Afrocentric artist. And what they naturally do is salvage all of those stories and all of those events of our own history, which our ordinary Barbadian people know nothing at all about. If you talk to 10 people in North today or any part of Barbados, and you ask them about Rabbit Sherman Ford or Mignon Ford, they might ask you to whom are you speaking about? Here is one of the most important couples, not one single man, but his widows, who went into all of the relations with the Ethiopian War. She's living in the middle of the school, she had to leave the premises. So anybody can imagine the horrors, the indignity that this lady suffered. Starting a small school at residence with 5 or 6 students. And there he was, and there the emperor himself, and his wife, Mignon, they were so impressed by these 2 Barbadians that came on board and single-handedly raised the standard of education in the new Ethiopia. It must be applauded. This is so important. And when we begin to think about Pan-Africanism, we have to come on board. We have to realize that this man was born right here in Barbados. So I was so moved by this story that I began my own love story for Arnold and his wife Mignon. And I produced at least 5 paintings, and they're in some very substantial and international prestigious collections. This one on the left is actually the collection of Anderson Topping. That's the gentleman in the conglomerate of Sony World. And this is a very important painting. This one, we want to travel through the Caribbean. It's only about 10 months old. But when I was doing it, I want Barbados to feel very pleased, as I'm pleased now, that Dr. Marion Dalby traveled all the way from the United States to America to visit me at my humble studio, and I'm the first and only Barbadian person beside Abby Manning, his granddaughter, who, yes, Minnie Abby, who is the recipient of the Marion Arnold Ford Foundation. And I am so pleased. And I thank you again, and I thank you for I don't want to bore you too much, but what I would like everybody here to do is to pick up this book. It is a very small volume, but I want to tell you, I've been reading it for 40 years old. It bridges the gap, and I said to David Comissiong, it bridges the chasm. There is a wide chasm, there's a wide divide between what is happening in our history and what has happened already. So I want to thank you, and most of all, I want to give thanks to those who have gone before us for their efforts. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother David Comissiong. Brothers and sisters, permit me to read the first page of the story of the book. And I quote, our story begins with a scene in a room in a small house in Addis Ababa, the capital city of the African kingdom of Ethiopia. It is September 1935. And lying on his deathbed in the room is a 58-year-old black Barbadian man by the name of Arnold Josiah. Also in that room is Arnold's much younger Barbadian wife, Mignon, in his fall, and their two newly born Ethiopian children, Yusuf and Abi. Arnold Josiah Ford is the most important leader of the West Indian and African American community in Ethiopia. In fact, he is the leader of a project to establish an agricultural settlement of repatriated black Jews of the diaspora on several hundred acres of land provided by Emperor Haile Selassie. But as a result of extreme stress and overwork to the point of the destruction of his health, Arnold's life is slipping away. And the last mission he seeks to perform is to extract from his young wife a solemn pledge that, come what may, she would never leave or abandon Ethiopia. You see, in September 1935, Ethiopia, the one African kingdom that had never been conquered or colonized, was facing a moment of extreme existential crisis. The brutal fascist Italian dictator Benito Mussolini had made clear his evil intention to invade, conquer, and colonize Ethiopia, and had started the process by amassing a formidable array of military forces in the territories bordering Ethiopia. And so, what promised to be a genocidal military invasion was imminent, leading most of the fearful African American and Caribbean migrants in Ethiopia to flee the country in haste. But who exactly, you may ask, was this dutiful, Ethiopia-loving Bajan man? And what had led him to journey so many thousands of miles from his Caribbean island home to meet his maker in this legendary ancient African kingdom? End of quote. That is the first page of the book. That is the scenario that the book begins with. That is the fundamental question posed on page 1 of the book, and the following 96 pages set out to answer that question. I will speak a little more about it later on, but at this point in time, I want to tell you that I have partnered with a Barbadian company by the name of Chattel House Books. So it's a company that runs bookstores in Barbados, online as well as physical, promotes Barbadian authors, promotes Barbadian writing, and this is the company that I want to work with in marketing this book, in marketing it not only in Barbados, but across the Caribbean and across the globe. We have all kinds of plans for this book, but I will ask our sister, the director, the chief executive officer of Chatham House Books, Mrs. Deborah Hazel, to come to the microphone and give you some insight into our plans for the Pan-African Love Story.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good morning as well for those who are in parts of the world. First, let me congratulate Ambassador David Comissiong for writing this wonderful book. And thank you, David, for partnering with our house books to do the distribution of the book. But I'm going to ask you to take it down to me one moment. Because when David approached us to distribute the book, we were very happy to. We thought this book was an integral part of the history. It was reading that should be through all the schools, whether in Barbados or internationally, as well as anyone who's interested in the contribution of Barbadian persons to the, or what we call the district shows. But I got really, really excited when I started to read the book and realized that my family actually had what in Barbados we would call a little history with Arnold Josiah Ford's family. And that history saw my family come into possession of one of the working manuscripts for that modern Ethiopian anthem and the return of that work to Arnold's family some years later. Just to give a little background, I grew up in a household hearing about this lady called Miss Jane Ford. And Miss Jane Ford was a very good friend of my great aunt who had raised my mother. And she was apparently not just a good friend, she was a neighbor. Through that relationship, my mother actually became friends with Arnold Josiah's children from his first marriage, Arnold and Mignon. And again, as I was, introduced to both Arnold and Mignon, my mother remained great friends with Arnold until Arnold's death. So we were very aware of this Miss Jane Ford. And this Miss Jane Ford turned out to be Arnold Josiah Ford's sister. Now, when Miss Ford passed away, all of her music books were given to my mother. And among the music books was the manuscript from Arnold Josiah Ford's work for that modern Ethiopian anthem. And in 2007, when they came to Barbados, she visited my mother to talk about, her family, her Barbadian part of the family. And my mother said, I have this music here. And she, in fact, gave it to me. So it has been returned to our own family. I thought that was really great to see that there is that history there. And my mother, who's 86 years old, is still very much able to talk about that story and even give a little history about Arnold's father and who he was and so on. A lot of research that they have done. And I've been quoting David and saying how we need a triple level. We need to know about the Barbadian end of it. Simply because when these books were written, they also showcase the history and social history of the country. So David, congratulations on what you've done. This is a very wonderful piece of our history. not history only for Barbados, but for Pan-Africanists, for Black people around the world. So congratulations on that. So now I have a little bit on that. My job basically is to tell you how you're going to be able to get this book. So locally, we already have this book distributed in bookstores. For those persons locally, University Bookshop, plus the bookstore, Days Books, the Barbados Museum, Booksource, and of course, Chapel Books. For those in the international market who are, I'm sure, very anxious to get hold of these books, we're going to be starting to get to the international market shortly. We're going to make sure that you can purchase them online. And this is going to be through both Chapel Books and through the online stores all over the world. In addition, we are going to try to work with the brick-and-mortar stores, particularly the areas where we have a large Caribbean diaspora, to make sure that this book reaches them in those markets. The persons would have asked, what about the e-book? Because yes, the print book is available, and that print book will be available, as I said, through brick-and-mortar stores, and through online purchasing. So you can purchase the print book on the online stores. But the e-book, we will be working with David to ensure that the e-book format is also available on all of the local and international platforms. So that will be coming shortly. And in the meantime, I would say to the persons in the international market, if you drop us a line at publisher@chattelhousebooks.biz, publisher@chattelhousebooks.biz, we will be happy to point you in the direction of the supplier of this title, or we will ship it ourselves to you. So have no fear. We will make sure that this publication reaches as wide an audience as possible, because it is worthy. It is worthy. So I'm going to encourage all of you watching this live stream to purchase a copy of the book. It is something you need to know about. As a person here in Barbados, if you are not reading, you're missing a part of your history. So I would like once more, on behalf of all of us, all of our ladies and here, to say, David, congrats, thank you, and we are happy to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beverly. That's how we have to do it. We have to build our own enterprise. Yeah, they have this, the Americans have this Amazon and whatever else. But we have our Chapel House books. We must work and build each other up. Brothers and sisters, I read that first page, and you would have heard that Arnold was on his deathbed. He was dying. And the final thing that he did was to get that pledge from his 30-year-old wife, Mignon. Mignon made that sacred pledge to him. Come what may, Mussolini could invade, I am not leaving. Now Mignon, this young woman from Wakefield Tenantry in St. John, Barbados, 30 years old. She's had 2 children for Arnold, Joseph and Abby, mere infants. Joseph is probably about 2 years old at the time, Abby a few months old. 2 weeks after Arnold dies, Mussolini's armies invade Ethiopia. This barbarian woman, not only does she not leave Ethiopia, but this barbarian woman, after the Italians conquer Ethiopia and occupy it and impose a violent, racist oppression and genocide on Ethiopia, this Belgian woman becomes an Ethiopian resistance fighter, in the sense that she opens her home to the young Ethiopians who are resisting the Italian invasion. She provides a refuge for them. She helps them with English translations. In fact, she even teaches them the English language. Several times she is arrested by the Italian fascists. Several times she is beaten. Several times she is incarcerated. The Italian occupation lasts for 5 years. Tens of thousands of Ethiopians are slaughtered. In fact, after the Ethiopians attempted to assassinate the leader of the Italian forces in Addis Ababa, he decrees a 3-day slaughter of Ethiopians in Addis Ababa. In other words, he gave license to the Italians that for the next 3 days you have the right, without any legal consequences, to kill as many Ethiopians as you like. 30,000 Ethiopians were slaughtered in that 3-day period. By the grace of God, Mignon survives. Many of her friends do not survive. She, for the rest of her life, she has to carry the pain of many of her friends and colleagues who were executed by the Italian fascists. But she survives. And after Emperor Selassie returns and resumes the government of Ethiopia, he sends out a call. Ethiopia has been demolished by 5 years of fascist occupation. We have to rebuild the country. And she immediately responds to the emperor's call. And she's an educator. In fact, one of the reasons she came to Ethiopia was, yes, her love for Arnold, but in addition to that love for Arnold, she was a dedicated Pan-Africanist. And she had decided that she was going to Ethiopia to share her skills as an educator with the Ethiopian people. And so she starts this little school in her little house. She doesn't have any books. She has to make slates for the children. She has to go and get some lime and fashion it into something like chalk. She said we had no textbooks. The textbooks were in our heads. We taught the children from the textbooks in our heads. But from those humble beginnings, she establishes a school that is so dynamic. She introduces the modern educational curriculum to Ethiopia. She establishes the first co-educational school in the entire history of Ethiopia. And her school is so dynamic and so impressive that no less a person than the emperor himself, the emperor's favorite daughter, Princess Zenemi, she died tragically at the age of 16. The emperor was so impressed with Miss Ford's school that he approached her and asked her to do him the favor of renaming her school in honor of Princess Zenemi. And so said, so done. The school, the Princess Zenemi School, popularly known in Ethiopia as PCW School, went on to become a phenomenal educational institution in Ethiopia. taking education to new heights, breaking down gender barriers, bringing education and schooling to females, to women in Ethiopia. And many of the school's graduates went on to attain, very high and responsible positions in Ethiopia. In other words, this Barbadian woman played a critical role in developing modern Ethiopia. So this is the story that we are talking about. We are talking about two world historical personalities. Mignon, who came from Wakefield Tenantry in the parish of St. John. Arnold, born in Bridgetown, but grew up in the parish of St. Joseph. Both of them history makers. You cannot talk about the black classical music of America, about jazz, about spirituals, about black concert music, without factoring in the contribution of Arnold Ford, the master musician who went to Harlem in 1910, became the musical director of the New Amsterdam Musical Association, one of the critical institutions in the development of the classical music of Black America. He joined up with James Reese Europe. Between 1912 and 1915, their orchestra, the Clef Club Orchestra, was featured in several groundbreaking precedent-setting concerts at the famous Carnegie Hall. Remember, this is in the age of segregation, of Jim Crow. James Reese Europe puts together a black orchestra of 125 musicians, including Arnold Josiah Ford, who is the musical director of the New Amsterdam Musical Association. And here's how James Reese Europe explains what men like himself and Ford were doing in the field of music. And I quote from the book, "We have developed a kind of symphonic music that, no matter what else you think, is different and distinctive, and that lends itself to the playing of the peculiar compositions of our race. My success has come from a realization of the advantages of sticking to the music of my own people. We colored people have our own music that is part of us. It is the product of our souls. It's been created by the sufferings and miseries of our race." End of quote. This was the early development and coming of age of the African Americans' classical music, spirituals and jazz. And needless to say, the presence and input of our Barbadian musical hero, Arnold Josiah Ford, is to be found in these historic developments. In light of this, the Barbadian musician Arnold Josiah Ford has to be considered one of the legends and heroes of black music and one of the architects of the Harlem Renaissance. Arnold Josiah Ford. That is what this book is about. That is what this book is about. This man goes on. I mean, it is history after history after history. He goes on to lead, along with Bishop Wentworth Matthew, the Black Jewish movement. He goes on in the UNIA. He joins up with Marcus Garvey as early as 1916 or 1917, at the very beginnings of Garvey's career in the United States. In fact, it is said that he was second only to Marcus Garvey as the public face of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. He was not only was he the musical director, writing the music, conducting the bands, leading the marching bands, but he also organized the paramilitary bodies within the UNIA. Remember, He had 10 years in the British Navy, so he also had a military background. He produced the regulations for the paramilitary bodies. When the US government went after Garvey, he stood firm with Marcus Garvey, supporting his leader. And then and then after the Garvey movement goes into some decline, he accepts this invitation from the Ethiopians. They ask him to come to Ethiopia to help with the development of the falashas in the black Jews in Ethiopia. And he undertakes this mission. And all across the world today, wherever you find the Rastafarian movement, there's a song that they sing, an anthem that they sing. Ethiopia, the land of our fathers, the land where our gods love to be, as the swift beta hive sun gathers, thy children all gather to thee, with our red, gold, and green floating o'er us, with our emperor to shield us from wrong, with our God and our future before us. We hail thee with shout and with song. God bless our neighbors, the Busti, and keep Ethiopia free, to advance the truth and right, to advance with love and light, with righteousness leading, be haste to the call, humanity's pleading, one God for us all. That song is sung all over the world today. Wherever you find gatherings of the Rastafarian faith or meetings of the Ethiopian World Federation, they consider their anthem. Many people think it is an Ethiopian song composed by an Ethiopian, or it is a song composed by a Jamaican. No, it is a song composed by Arnold Josiah Ford of the parish of St. Joseph, right here in Barbados. Arnold Josiah Ford, Marcus Garvey had the vision of the Back to Africa movement, taking blacks from this part of the world and repatriating to Africa. Unfortunately, he was not able to realize that vision. Arnold Josiah Ford realized it. Arnold Josiah Ford, even though because of the Italian invasion, it did not last very long, but he realized it. He led the way and he brought to Ethiopia over 100 blacks from the diaspora to build the agricultural settlement that he was building in Ethiopia. And just as the wicked US government had targeted the Garvey movement and undermined it, they did a similar thing with Arnold Josiah Ford in Ethiopia. Just the same way they targeted the UNIA and they came with this trumped up charge against Marcus Garvey and did everything possible to pull down the Garvey movement in the United States. They did a similar thing to Arnold and this work in Ethiopia. And that is why there was so much stress on the man. He was giving his all. So that is why he died at the age of 58. He had taken so much upon his shoulders. So, brothers and sisters, I don't want to go on any longer. It is all I really can't do justice this evening. I can't tell you all that is in this book, but suffice it to say, in these 97 pages, we are weaving a story from 1877 Barbados, 39 years after the abolition of slavery, 1 year after the so-called Confederation Rebellion, and we are weaving that story through Harlem, the Harlem Renaissance, black music, the black Jewish movement in the United States, Marcus Garvey, the UNIA, the coronation of Selassie. Actually, in this book, you get a description of the coronation ceremony of Emperor Haile Selassie, the Italian invasion of Ethiopia, the occupation of Ethiopia, the fight back by the Ethiopians the program to rebuild Ethiopia, the plot against Emperor Haile Selassie, the military coup that overthrows Emperor Selassie in the 1970s, Mignon returning to Barbados, she returns home. Selassie visiting Barbados in 1966, his meeting with Right Excellent Arnold and Barrow, his address to the House of Assembly in Barbados, Harold Barrow's statement to Selassie in 1966. We go on, the rest, after Selassie's, the death of Selassie in Ethiopia, the downfall of the Derg, that terrible regime that had brought down Selassie, and the restoration of Ethiopia. She goes back, she's an old lady, when she dies, her two children, those two little boys, go on to become professors at Howard University. She is buried in Ethiopia. I will just end by giving you the epitaph on her tombstone, the inscription. After they buried her in Ethiopia, this is what they put on the grave. O Ethiopia, to thee she was called by duty. With thee she toiled for liberty. With thine she cast her destiny. In thee she rests with dignity. These are two of the greatest Barbadian, Caribbean, and Pan-African heroes of them all. And it is a shame that we don't know more about Rabbi Arnold Josiah Ford, and Mignon Lorraine Innes Ford. Many years ago when I met their son, that same little boy, Abi, 1935, who was in that room when Mignon made that solemn pledge. Many years later I met Abi when he was a retired professor, and I promised him that I would write this story for our people, especially for our people here in the Caribbean. Unfortunately, Abi passed in 2018 before I was able to produce this story. But I'm so pleased that I have been able to complete it. Abi actually helped me by giving me material. So there's some material in this book that is not readily available to many scholars, because it really comes directly from Arnold and Mignon's son, Abi. So I have been collecting material over the years. And last year, 2020, when we had a lockdown in Barbados, and we were confined to our homes, it gave me the opportunity to sit and write this book. And so this is my contribution to our people. I've written it for our people. It gives us important signposts of who we are and what is important in our history and heritage. It is my gift to our people. I hope that it is accepted, it is widely read, and that we get the full value of the lives of these two great Barbadian, Caribbean, African heroes. That's what I have to say. I just want to end now by inviting, once again, to take us out. We began with music. We began with perhaps the composition that many of us regard as the single most important musical composition in our history. And we will go out with one original song from Cali and Najuma. Thank you, brothers and sisters.
Blessed and thanks everybody. Give thanks for life, give thanks for life, give thanks for being here. Give thanks to Sister Hazel, Brother David, Sister power, but it was there on the floor. If you can see, I say you sharp and I'm your mind today. But I fight for what I know. Just stay strong. Matter pressure once I get just hold. Come together, we can all come together, we realize one. Until we are the stress and the strength. People say never can make sense. Never street, I'm gonna put it on the you see my people depending this song. I will never stop until you watch your tell you what I'm gonna be free on my beach. I love the early morning. Since every day when my eyes are set up to live yo, I said I'm talking, but you must get now. Don't judge me every day, my best friend. I'm not apologetic, I will love my mercy. Everything, running one stop time. So far I said, I don't know it. I put a fire on it, yeah. I get this away from it, more silent fire. Honesty, ancient energies, freestyling, powerful symmetries, rebellion, ancient melodies, and once time when I come out with them, power and say, isolation, you come from a good way, resonate, I am not ready, not be rich by a city, I am sick, full and then I see the golden, yeah. Community of your say for a moment, but the jewels I fall, so they must stuff for it, say, whatever, so you can't get it. Let's see, thank you.
Great starts there. Thank you, Khalid. Great starts. Thank you, obviously. And do we have the nation? Okay. So what I want to thank I don't even hold the camera. So I want to thank everybody for coming, for participating. It's very much appreciated. And yes, and I must make sure that all the guys, technical guys, need to get a copy as well. Okay. Thank you very much. Are we still running? Or we are right. Okay, good. All right. Thanks everybody. Thanks to you. Thanks, Emily, the jeweler, there's some juices here. I just tell me there's some juices. If anybody is a little thirsty. You're